How on earth do you follow that? Okay. So, a few years ago, I went to a meeting in someone else's home about 100 miles away. And I drove there, the weather was difficult. I arrived and I knocked on the door. I was at the right time on the right day. Is this sounding too loud, by the way? No? Okay. I was on the right time at the right day. And the person I was meeting looked astonished to see me. And I said, what's the matter? I said, I'm here at the right time because I'm often late. I said, no, you're at the right time. You're just a week early, basically. And I have the opposite problem today because apparently I'm here on the right day at the right time, but I'm a year late. So I don't know what you're expecting. Don't know what you're expecting tonight. But this has had a lot of preparation, this lecture, okay? So thank you for all of you coming out this evening in the middle of winter, and I'm grateful for many things. I'm grateful for there being no hockey game tonight. I'm grateful for there being no particularly good weather that would distract you. And I'm grateful for Joan, actually, Irving, for whose name is given to this lecture, for the possibility to be here following the great tradition that you've established, because I, too, am a lifelong supporter of teachers, good teachers and good teaching. And thank you to Peng for an amazing presentation. I realize I've had a great biography, but it could just do with a bit of editing, probably. I need a better editor, basically. Yeah. And so we have about an hour together this evening. And what I thought I would do is the following. So I'm going to give you, so you can all leave in 2 minutes, I'm going to give you the results of what I will talk about this evening, okay? So somehow through the next hour, these are the things you're going to hear in the light of this upcoming review that you all know a lot about in response to the PISA results, which many of you have been aware of. You know what the PISA results are, the OECD's PISA results that came out in December. I was in one country that I won't name about 2 weeks before this meeting with the minister, and the minister had got 2 statements prepared to give to the public. One if their PISA results went up, and one if their PISA results went down. Because she didn't know. And I said, well, don't you know how you're doing? Do you have to wait for one test of 15-year-olds to tell you how well you're doing? And then don't you know whether it's something to do with early childhood or something to do with what's going on in secondary school, or don't you know? Do you have to put all this onto the results of one test with a sample of 15-year-olds? But this generates enormous panic, actually, in many governments across the world. And my view is mainly, not exclusively, but mainly, PISA results should be ignored. Mainly. Because in each cycle, which takes place every 3 years, most people's results go up a bit or they go down a bit. Should never compare your ranking compared to other cultures, because they keep introducing new countries at the top. So it looks like you've gone down, but you haven't. They've introduced some other people ahead of you. And you might have gone down because other people's scores improved, but yours stayed the same. So never look at the rankings. And secondly, most people's scores go up and down by about 5 points. And given that the high performers score somewhere between about 475 and 535, 5 points is 1% of the total score. So if you go 1% up to 1% one year, one cycle, and up to 1% down another cycle, just, look at them and then carry on, basically. But every so often there's a big change, and then unless it's somebody's been cheating, then it is worthwhile paying attention to that. And when Finland was top of the first round of PISA results, it really led to a lot of thinking about what a successful system actually looks like. So they do tell us something, but they don't tell us as much as people say they tell us. And it's very easy to get what in business is called the bullwhip effect, which is an overreaction to a short-term result that might be eliminated by a longer-term trend. But this often precipitates or validates some kind of action that will follow. So then you call the commission, and these are its terms of reference. And I don't know what the results of this commission's report are, and I do know Avis Glaze, and we agree on some things and don't agree on everything. And I specifically asked her not to tell me or even hint at what the results of the review are. So when I say I don't know, I mean I really don't know. But we can all guess roughly what some of the terrain might be about here. So these are the terms of reference. So this is where we can expect some recommendations to be made. So as we think about, and this lecture is going to be in a way a response to what might come on the agenda here, here's about 5 things that'll come up tonight as we're in this session together. Mixed up with my shopping list, my packing items, and everything, bless you to my mother, everything else. So first, don't believe anybody who tells you poverty doesn't matter, because poverty really does. And on average, not universally, there are some exceptions, but on average, about 80% of student achievement is explained by factors outside the school. So poverty is a lot. It's not everything, but it is a lot, and we have to not be in denial about that, nor should it excuse the inaction that some of us feel we're then locked into because it's all to do with the family or the community or the society. But poverty is real, economic inequalities are real, teachers cannot change everything themselves, but we must do everything in our power in relation to that trend to kind of move it at the margins wherever we can by a few percent. But we need lots of other things going on in terms of economic investment, support, mental health support, lots of other things in terms of public investment alongside what we're doing in public education. That is the first thing. Second, I'm going to talk in a few minutes about a thing called social mobility. It's not a term we use a lot here, but in other countries it's in wide use. And social mobility means what are your opportunities to move, preferably upwards, in life economically and occupationally in relation to your parents. So if you come from a working class background, what are your chances and opportunities to be able to move up in relation to what your parents did over time through education and through other means? Some people think, some governments think, including Theresa May, for example, the former Prime Minister of the UK, David Cameron, Tony Blair, before them, and there are others. Some people think that social mobility is an alternative to equity. In other words, you can keep inequity so long as you get people moving up and down a lot. Are you with me? Yeah, what I'm going to tell you tonight is social mobility is not an alternative to equity, it is the consequence of equity. All right? So if you want more social mobility, you're going to need more equity which means smaller gaps in everything, not just education, but also economically and so on, so it's easier for people to move over time, and I'll explain that. Third, the old approach to equity used to be to narrow achievement gaps. So you'd say, here's a gap, here's a grid, here's some measures, here's Indigenous students compared to white Canadians, here's newcomers compared to long-established Canadians. Where's the gap? Where's the gap for special needs, for ELL? How do we narrow? Let's look at the data and let's figure out an intervention that we can make to narrow the gap. So inequity was almost understood as demographic categories. What I want to say to you tonight is that the new approach to equity is one of inclusion. So equity is inclusion, and inclusion is equity. And that if you want to achieve in school, then you have to be able to see yourself in the school in some profound and fundamental way. Not in all of it, because part of a teacher's job is to introduce children to new interests and new cultures, as well as existing interests and existing cultures. It's a bit of both, right? Not either or. But you can't introduce kids to new things unless they can begin prior knowledge by engaging with what they already have. So whether you're Indigenous, whether you're a newcomer, whether you're LGBT, whether you have a learning disability or some other disability, you have in some profound way to feel you belong and can identify with and are actively included within the curriculum, the teaching, the pedagogy, the community life that is going on in the school. So inclusion and equity go together, and in many ways they are now one and the same thing, and I'm working with the province of Nova Scotia on this at the moment to help it implement its inclusion strategy. Fourth, there's only about 5 of the 6 of these. Fourth is, there's no achievement without well-being. And there's no well-being without achievement. And the systems I look at often divide into people who are the well-beings, they're like Star Trek people, and they're usually kind of special needs people, ex-counselors, mental health people, they all care about well-being. And then there are the achievement people who are literacy, numeracy, math, curriculum, and they live in totally different worlds and hardly ever communicate with each other. So first, we have to understand you can't feel well if you're failing all the time. It's really hard to feel well if you're failing all the time. So achievement really does matter. And you can't achieve if you're not eating, if you're not sleeping, if you live in fear, if you don't have anybody to care for you, if you have post-traumatic stress, just like a million gazillion things. If those are all going on in your head, it's really hard to be successful. So I have to understand the relationship between well-being and achievement. And as teachers, leaders, and governments, we have to be able to articulate a positive relationship between well-being and achievement that the public can understand. So they don't feel if you're interested in well-being, you're just about making the kids happy and you don't care whether they're successful. Okay? And part of leadership, a big part of leadership, is not just data or even mainly data. It's narrative. It's being able to tell compelling, inspiring, inclusive stories in simple messages about complex things that everybody understands and most people feel relate to them. Fifth, the answer to most things is collaborative. I'll talk about better and worse ways of collaborating, and this is really fifth. Well, it's 5A and 5B, but it's collaborative. It's finding ways to get the profession to work collaboratively, not just in any old way, but in ways that are rigorous and challenging, as well as supportive and enjoyable. But getting the profession to work together and getting the districts to work together. So one answer may be, coming up, is how many districts you're going to have in the future. And that question should be an answer to an educational problem and not an economic problem, okay? So I'm just being really clear. Don't get distracted and resist the idea of fewer districts for its own sake. But do be clear, as the government should be clear, and everybody should be clear, that if we're going to change the number of districts, it should be an answer to an educational problem, and which may or may not, hopefully, have economic benefits, and not primarily to an economic efficiency problem. And on the basis of the work I've done in Wales and Scotland and various other places, a powerful solution is not to have districts be autonomous, like little clans, because I have worked in Scotland, remember? Right? So, but actually to get them to work together. And not just to share ideas, but to be collectively responsible for each other's equity. It's a big thing. So you cannot expect your teachers to work together if you're a principal who never works collaboratively with other schools. And you cannot expect your schools to work together unless your district works collaboratively with other districts for the common good of all children in your communities. So it's not just about, it's who collaborates, and it's how well they collaborate. That's the key thing. And last but not least, all high-performing systems commit strong public investment into education. All high-performing systems. You will not get a high-performing system with reduced public investment in education. You might want to spin it any way you want, but if you're data-driven, if you want to be data-driven, which I am, I believe in the evidence as well as the intuition and experience, look at the evidence globally, look at OECD, look at highly successful systems around the world with all their flaws and benefits, but two things are really clear, three things. One is strong public investment and public belief in education for almost everybody's child. Second is a strong teaching profession that is well paid, has high status, and third, ways to get that teaching profession to work together collaboratively by providing the time and the supports like learning support teachers or mental health professionals within the school so that the whole school can support the whole child. Because one teacher cannot support the whole child without becoming a sacrificial Mother Teresa and burning themselves out and ending up in a nunnery, which is no disrespect to nunneries, okay? So if we want to look at the whole child, we need the whole school working for the whole child, not just expect every teacher to be a kind of superhero who has the weight of the whole world and the whole class on their own shoulders. So those are the sorts of things that you'll be hearing in the time that is rapidly disappearing. And the way I'll try and approach that is I'll start fairly personally by talking about some issues about social mobility and equity. Then I'll talk about a transition between two ages that I think we're right on the cusp of at the moment. One is an age of what I call an age of achievement and effort, and I'll show you what that means in a second. And the second is an age of identity, well-being, and engagement. So achievement and effort, identity, well-being, and engagement. I think we're moving into the second age in many parts of the world now, and if we try and solve the problems of the second age with the strategies of the first age, we're going to find ourselves in serious trouble. It'll be a retrograde step, okay? So I'll try and take you through that. And then I'll expand a bit on what this second age of engagement, identity, and well-being actually looks like and what its professional and strategic implications are. And that should take us through pretty much to the end. There are a lot of slides here. Some I'll show slowly, some I'll show quickly, and some will go past so fast you'll not see them at all. So are you good? All right. Let's go then. We'll begin with me. Next month, there is this book, which is a memoir that I've written. It began as a hobby, then became catharsis, and finally became something I thought might be of value to other people. It's a memoir of social mobility. It finishes at the age of 22, because it was all downhill after that, okay? This is essentially, it's a memoir coming not only from my own head, but also from old school documents, inspection reports, and so on. And it is about the experience that the forwards by Nicola Sturgeon, First Minister of Scotland, and Boris Johnson's most hated enemy. So that goes down well in my books. It's the experience of growing up in a northern mill town called Accrington in Lancashire, in a working class community. And essentially what it was like, increasingly as time went on, living on one side of the town and going to school on the other side of the town. And it fast forwards at various parts, because this is one of the communities in England that was most pro-Brexit. And in some ways it's trying to understand, not blame, why this kind of community is pro-Brexit. Because before you blame and criticise and oppose, you have to understand, which is what both parties in the UK, in Britain, failed to do. Social mobility was a concept invented by this man, Petrin Sorokin. Petrin Sorokin was Russian, and he himself came from modest beginnings. He was the son of a travelling craftsman, a widowed travelling craftsman, who rose to be a professor in sociology at St. Petersburg University in Russia. He was an opponent of communism, so he was imprisoned several times, sentenced to death, and eventually exiled to the United States, where he became a professor in Chicago and eventually rose in the 1920s to establish the sociology department at Harvard University. You can understand why he would invent the concept of social mobility, and particularly the idea of vertical mobility, of moving up and down. And vertical mobility for Sorokin meant two things. One is, if you have a society in layers, the first idea is how do individuals move up and down through those layers, right? Second, which is more complicated that I'll come on to, how do the layers move up and down? How do they get further away or closer apart over time? Most people think of social mobility as movement between the layers, not movement of the layers themselves. It was pneumonia. Not bad for a 7-year-old, okay? And the first and only word I read unsuccessfully was psithis. P-S-I-T-H-I-S. Does anybody know what psithis is? Psithis was before coronavirus. So psithis is defined as a progressive wasting pulmonary disease. Who on earth devised a test for two successive words defining wasting pulmonary diseases for a 7-year-old to read must have been totally off their head. What I didn't know was this test at the age of 7 was being used to decide which stream I would go into in primary school. The A stream or the B stream. I did well on the test. I went into the A stream. And old school records show me at age 7 who went into the A stream and who went into the B stream. I remember almost none of the names of the people in the B stream, apart from the kid who beat everybody up, including me, okay? But I remember almost all of them in the A stream. At the age of 7, we were already headed on different paths. And then I have another list at the age of 11 of the same kids. And beside them is the name of the school that they went to. And most of the A stream went to grammar school, and none of the B stream went to grammar school. At the age of 7, it had already been decided which path we were on. You're probably wondering, which one am I here? Okay. So, we invented Movember, by the way. And in the middle, so I'll talk about me and Peter. Peter's in the middle. Peter lives in Vancouver now. He emigrated at the age of 21. He was a factory worker, he emigrated. He wanted to join the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. It was his fantasy, but he didn't check out the data. And when he arrived, he found out he was half an inch too short, okay? Because height mattered in those days. When Peter took the test for the 11 plus, he went to borrow a kid's rubber eraser, and somebody accused him of cheating. So he walked out in disgust because he's really stubborn, he's headstrong. So he failed the test. He went to secondary modern school, then he went to work in factories, toolmaker. And in our 50s, we were fixing something together. And I said to him, Pete, I said, you're so lucky. Yeah, but it was like, you know, it was like IKEA, except they didn't have IKEA. It was like IKEA furniture. I said, you're so lucky, you're so good at this, I'm clueless at this. He said, I'm not lucky at this. He said, I have no talent for this whatsoever. My talent is in art, in opera, and in military history. But I've never been allowed to use that talent because my school took it away from me. And this is what happened in a highly selective, test-based system where tests were used for selection. Why am I telling you all this? From the 1960s, does it even matter anymore at all? Well, do you know who this is? It's Napoleon. And Napoleon's famous for many things, but what is little known is he invented a concept called meritocracy. So Napoleon was a minor nobleman in the French army who was often mocked for his Corsican accent, just as I was mocked for my accent when I was in secondary school, because I came from the wrong side of town. I had friends who took elocution lessons to get them to speak properly so they'd have a chance. So to take my language away, in effect, so I'd have a chance of being more... I kept mine. People, when I open my mouth, people in England can still tell where I come from. Yeah, they can. Yeah, you're a bit surprised by that. Yeah. I mean, I have a bit of Canadian, stuff as well, but so I invented the concept of meritocracy, and his idea was, now they'd decapitated a lot of the aristocracy, the way you get promoted would actually depend on your ability, on merit, on your intelligence or fighting ability, not on who your parents have been. And then this concept of meritocracy was taken up seriously in the UK by a man called Michael Young. He actually advised on the establishment of comprehensive education. But he wrote it as a satire. He imagined a society where there would be perfect meritocracy. Think of that. Think of a society where everybody does succeed according to their talents. Everybody. And nobody will get to be Prime Minister, not even Boris de Pfeffel Johnson, because he went with a group of old Etonians to the most private elite school in the country. Imagine if everybody got exactly where they should be according to their talents. What would that look like? And Young said, it would be a disaster. Because some people wouldn't ascend at all because they'd have no talent for it. And those who did have talent would get to the top and they'd look down on the people beneath them, unlike empathy and compassion. They'd have contempt and disgust for those below them. And then they'd start to worry about whether their children would be mobile. So they'd purchase bright children from poor people. And you think, how ridiculous could this be? But this is exactly what Matthew Stewart in The Atlantic in 2019 says we do now. What do we do, those of us who have been socially mobile people like me. Many teachers who came up from the working class. What do? If our kids struggle, we buy them extra tuition. We try to put them into French immersion because it is a tacitly elite system that does not cater well for children with special educational needs or who have behavioral problems. We move house to be closer to the schools in the more middle-class districts rather than the schools in the working-class districts. We angle an internship for our child with a friend or an associate. And for every opportunity we give our own children, we take opportunities away from other children. We are part of the problem that we struggled all our lives to overcome. And the meritocracy becomes a new aristocracy. The helicopter parents, the curling parents, as they call them in the Netherlands, who sweep every obstacle out of their children's path. Yeah? So you're going to go away with that one. The new aristocracy. And this man, Lee Elliott Major, who's the first professor of social mobility in the UK, and was head of a foundation, Social Mobility Foundation, talks about the educational arms race that is going on in country after country, where every parent is trying to starts in Asia, starts in Shanghai, starts in Hong Kong, starts in Korea, but there's a lot of it in England and the United States and Canada as well now. Everybody trying to give their kid that little extra club, that little extra push, that little extra foreign travel, that little extra internship compared to everybody else's kid. So this is the problem of social mobility when we think of it as individuals within an unequal system. It becomes the new aristocracy. The answer is we have to do something about inequality, including economic inequality, in order to bring those levels closer together. And by the way, Canada is much more successful at this than the United States or the UK. Already, much so, let's not take that away, okay? And the people who help us understand this are Wilkinson and Pickett, not Wilson Pickett. He's anybody over 65 will know who Wilson Pickett was. In their book, The Spirit Level, which looked at worldwide demographic data correlating what they said is the biggest predictor of problems of well-being, which is economic inequality, society by society. And so, here they show that social mobility is lower in unequal countries. So the more inequality you get, the less social mobility you get. And if you look up here, Canada actually does pretty well. It's up with the Nordic countries, right, in relatively low economic inequality and pretty high social. So my argument is not that we're in a bad place. My argument is actually that we're in a good place. We don't want to lose it or give it up. Down here at the bottom end, you've got the UK, the country of my birth, and the US, where I lived for the last 15 years until last year, and I'm here to help you. And then you've got child well-being. So child well-being is measured by, for child well-being, I could show you here rates of imprisonment, alcoholism, drug taking, incarceration, almost anything, any social problem you want, and we'll get a pretty similar graph. The more equal the country is, the better child well-being is, because people are not so agitated about people who are getting on a lot more than they are, which is essentially, doesn't come from absolute poverty, it comes from relative inequality. That's where all the angst comes from. So you see on this, we're not quite so good. We're kind of in the middle here. And with the USA and the UK down again at the bottom and the Nordic countries up at the top. So what all this is telling us is if we want to do something about giving kids a chance, it's about making the system as equal as it can, not perfectly equal, but as equal as it can possibly be, because the levels are closer together, the rungs on the ladder aren't as far apart, you're not having to stretch yourself like this every time in order to get up there. And so that kids like me could get a chance. Kids like me from a working class home, whose father died when he was 12, who was brought up in a council house, whose two brothers then left home, whose mother had a nervous breakdown because she was working 3 jobs, cleaning, shop work, and looking after people's children, and could no longer cope, who had to look after his mum because his mum couldn't look after him, who never got to a class in secondary school for almost a year before 11 o'clock in the morning, whose results went spectacularly down because of that, and whose school never talked about it. And it's so because you need more equity for more support, more intervention for people in circumstances like that. And for me, yeah, was it hard? Yes. But I'm not black, I'm not indigenous, I'm not female, I'm not gay. I don't have any of those other forms of marginalization so you take any of those, and then you put what I experienced on steroids. For many kids who suddenly find they're raising their brothers and sisters instead of their parents raising their brothers and sisters. They come through your door like every week, every year. And to get more equity, we have to pay attention to these kids' lives as well as their maths and literacy achievement. Are you with me so far? How are we doing for time? Not too bad. Okay. We've got about, another 20 minutes? Good. Can I have a drink of water? It's getting a bit hot. So what are the 2 ages? Here we go. This will go through fairly quickly. You can take photographs of anything you like, and I'll leave the slides here if people want the slides here. Okay? So the first age is the age of achievement and effort. This is where a lot of the world was between 2000 and 2015. This is what it looked like. These are the questions. How are we doing as a country, as a system, as a school? How do we know? What's the evidence? What's the data? What's our judgment? How can we get better? And how will we measure that? And how could this benefit everybody, which is achievement gaps and equity? Okay? Now, one way you can do all that is through bad leadership. And I've no idea how this slide got there. I think somebody must have snuck it in. Somebody must have snuck it in by accident. But there's some spaceship somewhere keeps sending these bombastic blonde men down to us, and I wish they'd stop it, actually. A slightly less evil than this, as an example of what I've just been describing, is Wales, the country, not the species. And in 2013, I did a review of Wales with a team from the OECD, a team of 4 of us. And they wanted us to advise them on their improvement strategy. So what happens is you go for a week, there are 4 of you, it's incredibly intensive. You're on from like 7 to 11 every day. You see schools, you see teachers' unions, parents' representatives, the student commissions, school districts, you see just about everybody. And it's constantly processing what you've got. And we went into the minister at the time, who's not the current minister, and we went into the minister at the time and we said, what's your vision for improvement in Wales? And he said, I'm not kidding. He said, he didn't say that actually, I just said that. Our vision is, we're currently about, I can't remember the number, but it's in the like 43rd on PISA. And our goal is to be in the top 20 within the next couple of years. And we said, what? And that's printed in the report. What's not printed in the report is the next question, which is, we said, why? And he said, well, then we'd be higher than England. So, you know, so I think the main goal for you is be better than Saskatchewan. You're already higher than Saskatchewan. Just, you know, be higher on your achievement numbers and, you know, let that drive you. That's the main thing. And we said, how are you going to do that? And he said, well, what we're going to do is you can buy tests for PISA now where kids can practice. So they develop the skills, and we'll give that to the kind of 13, 14-year-olds. And when they come to take the test in a couple of years, they'll perform better than the results. And we said, you're crazy. We asked you, what's your vision for Wales? Didn't know. What's your vision for the Welsh learner? Didn't know. Everybody we met practically in the ministry, the senior team of the ministry, was not a former educator from Wales. They were either educators from other countries, ironically England, or from other sectors like travel and tourism. It was as if they had no confidence in their own people, in their own leaders, in their own professionals. This was a kind of bad version of the age of effort and achievement, which is people just wanting to get the results up at any price because they look good, basically. A better version, actually I'll show you this as well, because this is important. This is another graph from OECD that compares achievement to life satisfaction. The interesting place is this cell here. So this cell is high achievement on PISA, low life satisfaction. So most of these countries are countries in Asia with, in some cases, high rates of suicide. Japan, where when kids leave school, they talk about wanting to escape learning. So when they go to university, they stop learning because they're so sick of the testing. In Korea, they talk about examination hell. But a curious one there is so many of these have very high inequality, but the exception is the UK. It has quite high inequality, and there's some there that don't have, like Japan doesn't have high inequality, but what they all have is a lot of testing, high stakes testing. So if you overinvest in the high stakes testing as the answer, these could be some of the consequences that you will find. Even if you're successful, high achievement, low quality of life satisfaction. Are you with me so far? But not all the age of effort and achievement is bad. Where does it work? Where does it work in a kind of top-down way where you say, group of people are going to decide we're going to focus on 3 things and get everybody to do them with real focus and relentlessness. It works when your goals are basic. You've got few priorities, not many. You can easily measure the outcomes, and you put a lot of support into the system, professional development, training, and so on. What does this look like? It looks like Ontario in the first half of the 2000s. So Ontario has relatively simple goals, 3 priorities: literacy, numeracy, high school graduation. Clear ways to measure it through a thing called the EQAO test, and then graduation rates. Our evidence, so you'll see in a second, our evidence is that actually you did get achievements a lot in literacy at a sustainable rate. So we think most of it was not cheating, but was sustainable and genuine because it had a lot of professional development support, a lot of training, a lot of focus. Not much achievement in maths because you can't change literacy and numeracy, literacy and math all at once. It's too much. So you either don't achieve in math if you're focusing on literacy or vice versa. And better to do it deliberately than doing it by default. Okay? That's why everybody's focusing on math now, because we're obsessed with literacy for 15 years. Okay? So this is what Ontario was like during this period. So, but evidence that some of it was sustainable. There were some costs. I'll talk about those in a minute. But evidence that some of it was sustainable. How do we know? Because for over 10 years, we've been collecting data from 10 of Ontario's 72 school districts. Here they are. The one you're closest to is the Kawatin Patricia District School Board, way up in the top left, which which is about, 3 hours from you? About 3 hours drive in good weather. Our second phase of work is in this report, which is online. You can get it off my website, called Leading from the Middle. And we should have finished the book off this by April, we're hoping. I'm not going to talk about that. One of the downsides of the way that Ontario approached this, which is, so it had a test called the EQAO. So one of the things that may come on your radar is accountability is definitely going to come on. So I'd guess there'll probably be some discussion about testing. Okay? Now, what Ontario understood was that high-stakes testing had very negative consequences. And by high stakes, they mean that the tests give you data on everybody, and then you use them to know where the system's going. And in America and England, anybody that fell behind would get punished. They get an inspection, they close down the school, fire the principal, right? This is like really high stakes. And they'd all be public, and you could compare school with school, district with district, etc. And Ontario was against that. So it developed what's now in the language starts to come to be called mid-stakes tests. So mid-stakes tests mean there are some consequences, but they're not as bad. You don't fire principals, you don't close down schools, but you might have a lot of intervention. And you might have a lot of outside pressure saying you need to focus on that, your results are down, make sure you get them up. Not sure that teacher's the best one. You might want to be thinking about another one, district. Perhaps you should move your principal out into this school rather than keep them in this school. So so there were consequences. And within about the next 3 months, I have a paper on the effects of EQAO in the Journal of Educational Change, which you'll be able to read, which is very data-driven. And what this shows is even during the most recent period of reform, of which I'm very supportive and was an advisor for with Premier Kathleen Wynne, which focused on well-being, inclusion, equity, broad excellence, and so on. Even during that period, they inherited the EQAO and kept going with it in grades 3, 6, and 9. And what did we find? We found these effects. A cultural bias in the tests, questions about Wayne Gretzky, who if you've just come in from Somalia, you wouldn't have a clue who Wayne Gretzky was, for example. Hard to believe, but you wouldn't. Real confusion about exclusions. So if you exclude somebody, they count as a 0, which takes your test results down. And if you include them, they have to sit there throughout the whole test not being able to speak a word of English if they've just arrived from another country, or French. Are you with me? So huge dilemma for the teacher. So we see massive stress for the teachers who end up doing things they don't believe in order to comply with the test regime. A lot of time spent on test prep, so we came across kindergarten kids practicing filling in bubbles. Right? Kindergarten kids. We found out that in the years where there was innovation, including Michael Fullan's Deep Pedagogies for Deep Learning, new pedagogies for deep learning, which is a good innovation. Where was it happening mainly? Grades 4 and 8. Not 3 and 6, where the tests were, not even 2 and 5 the year before the tests. The innovation was happening where the tests were occurring. And we had teachers talking about how completely different it felt trying to deal with innovation in tested years compared to non-tested years. So it actually has a negative effect on economic competencies, economic skills, 21st century skills, has a negative effect on all those. And a teamwork, collaboration, looked like what one teacher called racing cycles. So these are 6-week cycles where you'll identify where the kids are with the test results. So you develop ongoing test results, figure out who's green, who's amber, who's red. Look at the ambers and the reds, who are the ones who are falling behind. Decide a quick intervention which will get you a result by the end of the 6 weeks. And these are called learning cycles or data cycles, but one teacher called them racing cycles because they said you're just off one 6-week cycle, then another 6-week cycle, then another. So it's all frenetic and short term. basically, focused on the literacy and the math. So, are you with me so far on this? So, it's there even in mid-stakes. And so we ended up reporting the results of our work to Kathleen Wynne. So I went to a meeting with Kathleen Wynne and all her team. And I said, she asked for feedback from all the advisors. And I said, well, here's my feedback. You're doing very well on well-being. You're doing very well on collaboration. I gave evidence why. And I said, the thing is, you really care about well-being, but you've inherited a testing system that is creating ill-being in young children. So I want you to acknowledge, as Premier of this government, that your government is creating ill-being amongst young children. And I don't believe you want that. And I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm asking you to take collective moral responsibility for the fact that your government is creating ill-being amongst young children. The result was she gave the 6 advisors, including me, the job of doing a review of the whole assessment system. So be really careful what you complain about. and the result was this report, which was a review. We recommended lots of things, the most radical of which was abolishing all mid-stakes testing until 11 years old, until grade 6. Lots of other things about cultural bias and so on. Under the radar, EQAO has dealt with a lot of the recommendations, even under the Ford government, but not abolished grade 3. Grade 3 is still there, and the Ford government took the report down off its website. So if you want to read the report, please go to worldwideweb.andyhargreaves.com and you'll be able to get it from there. So sometimes research can have an impact on policy, okay? It's just bad luck that another government got elected, but it's still there. It's there for when there's another. So that's one thing to watch out for on accountability. Are you ready for kind of one more thing? All right? So here we go, fairly quickly. So now, where all this, the age of achievement and effort, doesn't work is when the goals are complex, right? So when your goals are economic competencies, well-being, mental health, 21st century skills, character, citizenship, and the goals are complex, the problems are complex, society is rapidly changing, newcomers, people with PTSD, right? All these things. A lot of diversity, more and more diversity, more and more recognition of diversity. That's always been there. And then top-down doesn't work because you can't know everything about everything. So then you need another way to approach it. So the age we're in now, I think, is this age. Identity, engagement, and well-being. Follow me close, this is going to go fast, okay? Questions are, who are we? Who are we? What will become of us? Who will decide? Who are we? What will become of us? Who will decide? So back to my school, I'm going to miss that. These are not abstract questions. In South Korea, there's a network of 1,500 schools around the city of Seoul that are focused on innovation through peace, dignity, and social justice. They're countering the examination hell with leaders. And it was all started, by the way, by one teacher 10 years ago. And I went into his house, into his modest, humble apartment with him and his wife to have a beautiful dinner where he talks about how it started with one and now there's 1,500, okay, all committed to this. Scotland, this is so this is not literacy, numeracy, high school graduation. Successful learners, confident individuals. I can go into practically any school in Scotland and ask any child of any age, what you're learning and why you're learning it. If it's quadratic equations, they'll tell me. And the answer is not because it's on the test. If it's tundra, they can tell me. They know why they're learning what they're learning, and they can articulate it confidently to, can your kids in your schools? Effective contributors, responsible citizens. This is where Scotland, what happened to Scotland on the last round of PISA results. So with the approach we've taken with them, here they are, they've gone up from 495 to 505. So they've gone up 10, not 5 points, not 1%, but 10 points. That's a lot on PISA in one cycle. So we think it's a sign that there's something going on. What have we done in Scotland with the Scottish government? A couple of things, and then I'll come on to Ontario. First, at first they wanted standardised testing, and we talked them out of it, because we're 10 advisors, I'm one of 10. We talked them out of it. What they do have testing, so you might want to think about this when you get onto accountability. They do have testing. It's not high stakes. The results of the tests go to the teachers, and they inform teachers' professional judgment. It's the professional judgment on a rubric of how well their kids are responding to the curriculum that is evaluated. The test results, all they give you is a national measure about where the country's going. You cannot compare school with school. You cannot compare district with district. The paramount priority is teachers' professional judgment, and the tests inform that judgment along with all kinds of other data, including because teachers do tests, right? You do tests of your own, and those and other information. The paramount thing is teachers' professional judgment. So don't get into a discussion of tests and no tests, because you'll lose. You'll lose. But do get into a good discussion about tests and judgment and the relationship between tests and judgment. And beware of the favorite solution of samples versus census. So a census is you test everybody, the whole cohort, and then you can measure everybody. And I was against that until I was an advisor to Kathleen Wynne. And I was in favour of samples where you can't intervene in ways that affect the results, right? If you just take a sample. And why have I changed my mind? Because one of my colleagues, Carl James, who is Caribbean Canadian, said we had to have a census because one of the most marginalised groups in Ontario is historic African Canadians. Refugees and newcomers are fashionable. Many of them are high-achieving families who've immigrated and taken a temporary fall and are ambitious to get their kids back to where they were. Something we never talk about, but it's there. That's why we do so much better than the US, who have Mexican laboring immigrants and many other populations as well. And the historic African Canadians are constantly under the radar. And if you take a test of everybody and know where they are and what's happening to them, it gives you an obligation to respond because of the transparency. And it changed my mind. And the question is, can you change yours if the evidence warrants it? And equity is the paramount consideration. So then Ontario. This is last of all. Ontario's emphasis under Kathleen Wynne was broad excellence, equity understood as inclusion, well-being while maintaining public confidence. And I'm just going to show you some quick things about identity here, because remember, to succeed, you have to be able to see yourself in the school. What does that mean? Because it's complicated. Here's our research team. We went all across the province by train, plane, and automobile. We collected data all across. There's Kiwat and Patricia again, up there. What we found with the schools and their inclusion policies, or the districts and their inclusion policies, was just look at the top, just look at 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock, because those are the things I want you to focus on, was they needed a way for each district to respond to their local community, the particular diversity that they had, and then get the districts to work together so they could help each other with their strategies. So somebody might be good on assistive technologies. Somebody else might be good on learning, on self-advocacy, for example. So the point is, each community is unique. You cannot have a standardized solution, but communities should not be alone, so they need to work together, and there was a structure to help that come about, so they could collaborate transparently and be responsible for each other's success. And they'd have an annual fair of all 72 districts where they'd share their results every year on the basis of what it was that they'd learned. That's the essential part of the strategy. In Scotland, what have we done? There are 32 districts in Scotland, a population of 4 million. They were all like clans, totally separate from each other. Little collaboration except amongst the clan chiefs, right? And at one point they wanted to eliminate the districts because it got in the way of implementing government policy. And we advised there's a better solution. Get them to work together. So now the districts are clustered in groups of 6. There are 6 regional collaboratives. Each collaborative, the districts are collectively responsible for all equity. Each one takes the lead on something, one on technology, one on maths, one on something else. And to each cluster, there's a challenge advisor assigned whose job is to support them and keep pushing, keep nudging, just making sure they keep on the case and they get the support that they need. So, this is a kind of what we call leadership from the middle, not leadership from the top. Big part of that is identity. Francis Fukuyama, after the end of a very interesting book on identity, says in the end we should all only have one passport. I have 2. And it's not all about the shorter queue at the airport. Actually, my English passport's going to be useless, so. Who's this? Drake. How does he identify? He's black, he says. He's Jewish, he says. He's from Toronto, he says. He's not one thing. He's many things, all at the same time. Former doctoral student of mine, Alison Skerrett, says many kids now are transnational. They belong and their families to 2 places. They might go back and forth to Brazil. Their mother might be here. Their dad might be in Brazil or Pakistan or India. And they'll leave for months at a time, weeks, and you have no idea where they've gone. And how do you keep track of them? And then we have Skype and Zoom. So people now can and do belong to more than one place at the same time. We don't need to have metaphorically or physically just one passport, just one way to be. We have multiple ways of being. Kimberly Crenshaw called this intersectionality. Actually, I loved it when Kathleen Wynne said intersectionality. To hear a premier say intersectionality, it made me excited, basically. And Kimberly Crenshaw said she studied battered women. And Kimberly Crenshaw said, the thing is most battered women's research is based on white women. And it's different if you're black, if you're poor. You have to take account of all those things. It's intersectionality for her was tragic. For Drake, it's romantic. For many people, it's contradictory. I was president of an international congress for 2 years. We had our first congress in Africa, in a predominantly Muslim country. And then one of our members said, why are we holding conferences in countries where homosexuality is illegal? Because we deal with conflicting human rights. Our Franco-Ontarian schools, very protective successfully of Franco-Ontarian cultures, had much more difficulty accommodating their Lebanese students, their Moroccan students, their Algerian, who didn't want the culture, they just wanted the language. Conflicting human rights. Our Catholic districts were much slower to accommodate LGBTQ students than our other districts. Conflicting human rights. It's complicated. It's not just about a few festivals and a bit of music, right? It's much more complicated than that, but it's important. And here they are. These are just some of the groups. Franco-Ontarian, refugees, indigenous communities, LGBTQ. And don't forget, white working class. The white working class that I come from is also very suspicious of outsiders, all kinds of outsiders. Bit xenophobic, bit racist, very pro-Brexit. It's flawed. Doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it and acknowledge it exists. Because some religions are flawed, doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about them and acknowledge that they exist. All identities are flawed, but we still need to talk about them and acknowledge they exist, because if we don't acknowledge people's existence, if we deny their dignity by not giving them a name, this is the consequence. Right? So we have to find a way to engage with, so the white working class does not only fit into the box called privilege, it fits into another box of dignity by itself. And we have to find a way to talk about that, because that is the consequence. What have I tried to say? I can't leave you on that slide. That's an awful way to finish. Here we are. I'm not going to talk about any of that. So to finish, I've tried to talk about your upcoming review, to say that social mobility, which is the opportunity to move up, is not an alternative to equity. It is the consequence of equity. We have to pay attention to economic and social equity as well as educational equity. Poverty exists. It's not an excuse for anything, but don't deny its existence and its importance. Keep it on the table, whatever happens. In the age of achievement and effort, we had one way of approaching equity, and it had some success when our goals were literacy or math, for example. And there was a lot of support and a lot of backing. But the situation, when the world is now off its axis, and the situation we face with climate change, mass movements of people, global mental health problems, digital anxieties amongst adolescent girls. These are now such huge problems. We cannot pretend for a moment longer that all that should matter is literacy and math and improving results. They do matter, but not all or mainly or mostly what should matter, because remember, achievement is as affected by well-being as well-being is affected by achievement. So we must see equity in this second age of identity, engagement and well-being as enabling people to see themselves in the school, not just as a happy thing, but so the curriculum and the learning connects with their lives and their culture, whether they're newcomers or indigenous, or whoever they are, recognizing that this is not a box to tick like Black History Month, that people's identities are complicated. And to understand them, we have to know every child and the complication of every child. And the only way we'll do that is by the whole school and the whole district and the whole province working together for the whole child. And the answer is professionally respectful, professionally supportive, and professionally collaborative, not a hierarchy of tests and comparisons and interventions. I've no idea what the review will say, but I have some feeling about the agendas and the choices it might set. And as a profession, please don't say testing or no testing, but get into the issue is equity and what the best answer for bringing good equity and inclusion about is. I've talked for a bit longer than I intended to. You've been incredibly patient. Only 2 of you left. So to you. But I think they had good reasons, and I'm happy to stay on now and respond to any questions, interventions, or suggestions that you have. Thank you.